Hey, welcome back, guys. It's Micah coming back to you with another guitar lesson. Just recently, I sent out a question to my email list. I wanted to know what types of questions that they had about music theory. Now, music theory is pretty much the explanation of why music sounds good, why it sounds the way it does. It's the explanations of why we do things. And why they work, what notes fit together, what scales to play, what chords are going to fit there. All these things that when we're first learning guitar, we basically ask, how do I do this? We search it, we look it up, we read it in a book or whatever, and somebody tells us, this is how you play this chord, this is how you play this scale, this is how you play this song. Somebody is telling us how to do it, but one thing that we don't understand, especially right off the bat, is why? Why does it work? Why do these notes fit together? Why does this equal that chord? Why does this equal that scale? Why does this scale look like this here, and why does it look like that there? All these questions are really answered in music theory. Music theory is pretty much the explanation of why things work, why they sound good in music. And there are a set of, principles or rules that work. Yes, they can be bent or broken or adjusted, but the basic theory is just a good guideline so that you can understand how things will work. And then it'll also, as you get more advanced, you begin to understand how rules can be bent, how they can be broken and still sound good. In strategic situations where you would want to do things like that. So a lot of times we hear people bending those rules or breaking those rules, and we're like, "Wow, that sounded great," and we don't really think much about it. They just say, "This is how I did it. Here, you go do it," and you don't understand how can I duplicate this in a different situation? Well, theory. The more you build your knowledge in theory, the better you're going to understand how all that works, and this is what we're going to be working on right here. And the reason is, yes, I have another course that I am working on right now. Depending on when you watch this video, it may already be ready. By the time of recording this video, it is not ready. But I'm going to be building just a step-by-step walkthrough of taking people from the very beginning of basically no theory knowledge, no understanding of why you play what you play or why other people play what they play and it sounds good, into a very, I would call it a pretty darn advanced level. And I would say it's an advanced as you would ever need to be as a guitar player. Now, not saying that you can't go further than that, because you definitely can, because there's no end to it. Even me, I'm still learning more. But I know that it's very easy to search things online, and we end up with knowledge here, knowledge there, knowledge here, and we get these bits and pieces, and it's hard to connect them. So it's very helpful if we can find all these answers and all these connections in one single place that we can kind of walk through step by step. And that's what this upcoming course is going to be. So the first thing that I want to do is tackle one question, or at least kind of tackle it. It can be a pretty broad topic, actually, of scales. Why are there so many scales? What creates a scale? Why do I need to learn scales? These kinds of things. A lot of times we look up how to play scales, or somebody says you need to learn your scales, you need to practice your scales, but we don't really know why, so it just becomes an exercise to us. And this is something that is a very, very important part about music theory, is understanding scales. And in guitar, we have a bunch of scale patterns, and they all typically change as we move up and down the fretboard. But what I'm hoping to do in this video is give you a quick explanation so that you can see why there are so many different scale patterns, okay? There's specifically patterns in this video, and we may cover some other things in some other videos that also relate to scales. But this one, we're going to talk about why there's so many scale patterns. So why don't you come on in here, and what I've written out here is a G major scale. Now this may not really be one that you've even looked at before, this pattern, or it might be. But typically, a lot of times, the first scale that you're going to notice, or that you're going to be taught, let's just say for a key of G, would be something like this. Somebody says, you need to learn your G scale, and you might look on a fretboard diagram, and you're going to see something like this, and you're like, so then you just play all these notes, okay? Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Oh, missed one there. Okay, so one thing I want you to realize is, if you look in this diagram, you're going to see a G. Then you're going to see a 2, you're going to see a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, and a 7. And then you're going to look again, and you're seeing a root, which is still a G. All these red ones are Gs. Root, a 2, a 3, a 4, 5, 6, and a 7. And then you see it starts again, a root and a 2. And then, of course, over here you see a major 7. So if we were to play, so this would be one position of G. Now, if we move this up 2 frets, you're going to see that it's changed to, now it's A. It says A, but you still see the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then it all repeats the same exact shape, okay? So now this would be an A major scale, okay? So back 2 frets was a G major scale. Right here, it's an A major scale. So basically what that says is, when we play the pattern that looks like this, whatever note is right here in that pattern, okay? And if you look at it, where is it? Well, it's on the 6th string right there. It's on the 1st string right there, okay? Wherever you start a pattern, whatever note that is, that's what scale it's going to be if you play this exact pattern. However, let's move this back to G. If we were to, say, learn a different type of scale pattern, we were to do kind of what I had in the beginning, okay? And now you see it's still G. You still see a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, and a 7. But the pattern looks different, okay? And then we could continue this forward. And this is what a lot of times we refer to as a 3-note per string pattern. So we have 3 notes on each string. But you're going to see that you have a root, a 2, a 3, a 4, 5, 6, 7, and then it repeats. So basically, in a key, you're going to have 7 notes, okay? And the 2nd note is a 2, the 3rd note is a 3, the 4th note is a 4, 5th note, 6th note, 7th note, okay? And they all sit in the same position in relationship to that root note. So notice this note right here, G, A, it's a B. If we take the 3 and we put it over here as we had in that other position, it's still a 3. So when we change patterns, we're just moving the location of the notes that are used in the key of G. And when we keep a pattern the same, then we just use the position of the root note in that pattern to tell us what key that scale is in. Okay, so if we finish this off, this 3-note per string, here's another scale pattern. Okay. Now, a lot of times, folks would look at this and they would start a lot of times we would just, instead of going that 3 notes per string starting at the root, we might move to what a lot of people say this is it's just a different position, but it's still a G scale, which is true. And we can play patterns like this. Actually, usually what we would do would be we would play that there and this here. What you're going to see is overall, you're still seeing the same notes in there. You just that are being used. You're just moving where you're playing those notes, okay? And you'll notice that every time you find a root, the position of the right notes around that root always stay in the same place. In other words, the 2 is always one whole step after that root. The 3 is always, it could either be here, okay, after, whole step after the 2, or it can be here, down a string, back a fret, which is still a whole step after the 2. It's the same note as this note, but it's just a different location of finding that note, okay? And that's why you have different scale patterns. As we move up, now notice the 7, the major 7 is right there behind, or however you want to say it, right there by that root note. Okay, you'll notice it right here. Here's a root note. The major 7 is still there. The 2 is still there. The 3 is still there. Just look right there. 4 is right underneath it. 5 is right there, just like it would be here. If we go back to our first one, see the 3, see the 4, 5, 2, you see that major 7. So you'll notice that these patterns are identical around the root note, but as that root note moves to different places, you know, this G, there's a G here, there's a G here, there's a G here, there's a G here. You know, anytime you move to a different place and find a different G note, the pattern around the G note, if you're in the key of G and you're talking about G major, it will be the same. But okay, if we just look at it, major 7, 2. Okay, now right here, the 4 wouldn't be right there because on the B string there's a shift. Okay, there's always a shift forward on the B string. So whatever happens between string 3 and 2 is always going to be shifted this way, 1 fret when you're playing. Okay, but that 3 is there. That 4 would be right there. That 5 would be right there. Okay, there's another root, major 7, 2. So you'll see all these things, they're just repeating. It's not really a bunch of different things going on. It's the same thing going on around a root note. And that root note is really what is going to dictate what the pattern looks like at that area of the fretboard. So that's really one big thing that helped me when I realized that no, it's not about all these different patterns in different areas of the fretboard. It's really the same pattern that repeats at every time you find another root note. Okay, so if you look here, you see this set of notes. Okay, if you look here, you see this set of notes. If you look here, you see this set of notes. You'll notice they all look identical. And if we wanted to add a 6 after that 5, we could do that every time. 6 after the 5, 6 after the 5. Or we could put a 6 a whole step in front of that 7. 6 a whole step in front of the 7. 6 a whole step in front of the 7. Okay, there's another root there. We talked about that. Okay, same thing would go on here. But this is just to help you to see that if you're staying in a single key, all the different areas on your fretboard, I would focus less on the pattern as a whole across all the strings, but I would focus more on getting used to the pattern around the root note and where those root notes would be. Because it's always the same notes. It's always a root, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, 6, and a 7. As long as we're talking about a major key, that's what it's going to be. We can talk about different types of keys like minor keys and modes later, but really what I want you to do is just see what that is. It's really not all about all these different patterns everywhere. It's about one pattern that's repeating all over your guitar. So that's a pretty cool thing. One last thing that I'll mention in this video is when we do get into other scales, types, minor scales, your Dorian, your Mixolydian, that kind of stuff, different modes, these are just consistent adjustments to certain notes in the key, okay? I'm not going to get into that, but it could just be as simple as moving just a single note from here to there, okay? And if that was the case, then every time you see a 3, you would move it back 1, okay? Again, I don't want to get too deep into that on this video because it's getting kind of long now. But basically, when you're talking about scales, don't think about it as as long as you're staying in a single key, don't think about a bunch of different patterns. Find the one pattern and learn how to use it around that root note, because that pattern stays consistently the same all over your guitar neck. So I hope you found this video very helpful. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments below. If this was helpful for you, give it a like, and send in any questions that you may have about what makes music sound good. If you feel like you're missing some information and this was kind of at least helping you a little bit, it's likely that you would benefit greatly from the course that I have coming up. So by the time you're watching this video, if it's ready, I'm sure I have a link for it for you somewhere. But if not, just be on the lookout for it, because I think you're going to find it very helpful for improving your guitar playing. That's it for now. I'll see you soon in another video.